Awesome movie. I recommend you getting this. If you have an opportunity, there's also a book. Good reading. Okay, gentlemen. Oh, let's have prayer.
Bow our heads for a little prayer. Lord, here we are, thanking you for the Sabbath day. It's coming to a close, and we thank you for that, and thank you for all the blessings. And as we listen and we study about the plant life, we ask for your spirit to be with my wife as we explain some of the ideas on that. And again, we ask for blessing on us so we can bless others. And praise your name. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Okay, my name is Rhonda Beyreis, and we're going to go ahead and watch this movie.
Most people around here, when you think of a farmer, it's of the children's fable, Old MacDonald had a farm and had, you know, chickens and pigs and cows. That's not the way farming is anymore. It's strictly a business, and if you have to adapt and change, and biotechnology is going to play a huge role into the future in my ability to stay here and make a living.
Now you've got companies that are putting foreign genes into animals and fish that are changing the crops of the world fundamentally at the genetic level and polluting the planet with this genetic pollution. And once again, only a few scientists, corporations, and government regulators are making the decision. There's no democratic decision making. These technologies are legislation. They're going to affect our lives more than any law passed by any legislature around the world.
We are concerned about what we call genetic pollution, and we are concerned about making everybody understand that genetic pollution is something totally different from the chemical pollutions we have been stupid enough to initiate over the past 50 years or so, because chemicals never replicate themselves. Even a huge chemical pollution will over time get smaller. While for DNA, it may be the other way around, because DNA is self-replicating in principle. So a small pollution may replicate itself to become a huge pollution.
So how much more canola we got here, Martin? That's sprouted.
Well, I haven't seen a lot.
Oh, there's one. I just stepped over
there's
one.
Another, see, there's a couple.
Yeah, here we are.
But see, if you could have worked it, it would have put it in the moisture. It's I am organic, certified organic. The wife and I, we switched. We've been certified since 2000, and it's been doing very well for us. I mean, the certification is probably, switching to organic farming now is probably what has saved our farm over the conventional, eh? If we'd have been conventional farming, we wouldn't be here anymore. This is all canola, and look at it, you know, it's just about as thicker than the lawn as you get to the edge of the field, eh? So it just shows the amount of seed that's been blown by the wind.
Here's the pure evidence of what can happen in a situation like ours. Here is the plant that blew across.
The seeds,
with
yeah,
the
plant,
shell.
okay.
The plant is all shelled out. You see there's no pods left on that plant, but look at the crop that is growing here. This is a crop that was not seeded. It blew in. It blew in here in September, as Martin explained, and now it's germinated. It is a full-blown, healthy, GMO canola plant growing on organic land.
We had a strong wind, and the whole plant, like he had it cut into swaths, and they were laying out there, and when the wind comes up, and it just picked the whole plant up and blew it over here into my field. And what I was trying to get them to do was confirm that it was their product and get it picked off so the seeds wouldn't be left on my property. But now that it's still here, like I say, a big chunk of the seeds are already shelled out and laying on the ground.
You could see when I blew on it how light they are. They see how they move? Just like that, the seeds, so the wind blows them every which way. As spring runoff comes, some of these pods, and this one here is all shelled out too, but some of these plants that still have pods on, those seeds will drift during the winter and carry, and they can go a half mile, they can go a mile.
This is my life here on the line right now. You know, switching to organic saved me. Now I'm back in the commercial market again unless something, you know, and it's my lifeline that's on the line.
In the early 90s, the chemical multi Monsanto began developing genetic technology for plants. It made useful plants, such as canola and soya, resistant to the company's own pesticide, Roundup. Roundup kills every plant, without exception. Only the organically modified canola survives. In this way, Monsanto sells the farmers not only the patented seeds, but also the chemicals to match. Roundup spray is the most frequently sold pesticide in the world. However, there are also farmers who have had dealings with Monsanto against their own will. Probably the most famous one is Percy Schmeisser from Canada.
There was one other reason, too, that we stood up to Monsanto, was the fact that they had destroyed what my wife and I had developed over 50 years of research and development. Canola seeds that were resistant to various diseases we had on the prairies. They destroyed what we developed. And I'm sure that if I would do that Monsanto, I would be thrown in jail. But they can come on to a farmer or contaminate a farmer's field and destroy what he has worked on and get a lawsuit on top of it.
Percy Schmeisser operates a 650-hectare farm which his grandparents, immigrants from Bavaria and Austria, cultivated 100 years ago. In 1996, Monsanto introduced its genetically modified canola to Canada. A heavy storm during harvest time blew it onto Percy Schmeisser's fields. In August 1998, he was sued for illegally cultivating patented seeds from Monsanto. 2 courts sentenced him to pay damages to Monsanto of roughly $100,000, but refusing to be intimidated by the chemical giant, he took the case as far as the Canadian Supreme Court. The court made a distinction. On the one hand, as the court made expressly clear, Schmeisser had infringed Monsanto's patent because he had actively cultivated Roundup-ready canola and was thus no longer an impartial onlooker. On the other hand, the court decided that Schmeisser did not have to pay damages to Monsanto because he had not enriched himself by means of the genetic canola in his grain. Percy Schmeisser is now contemplating a countersuit against the global group on the grounds of environmental contamination, destruction of seeds, and defamation of character. International environmental organizations are competing to gain Percy Schmeisser as a speaker, to warn farmers in the US, Europe, and also the so-called Third World about chemical multis. In the last 2 years alone, he has visited over 40 countries.
In 1996, when GMO canola was introduced, we didn't have anybody to come and tell us what could happen or may happen. But now people from around the world do know from our experiences what has happened: contamination, loss of biodiversity, loss of our pure seed, and choice taken away. So we now know what can happen because of our experience with the soybeans and with GMO canola. And we know what would happen also with GMO wheat. And that's why other people around the world can benefit from our experience. We don't have no choice left. Our choice is gone. But the people in many parts of the world still have a choice.
A lot of good information there, and this, I recommend watching that. The next section of this was where in India the farmers were tricked into actually using the seeds, and they were promised these yielded great crops, and it failed tremendously, and the people were committing suicide. These Indian farmers, that's the next section of that movie, they would commit suicide because they couldn't pay the debt. You know, they'd get talked into spending all their money and put everything on the table just to get this yielded great crop of cotton, and it failed, and so there was multiple suicides. All right, so I don't know what's going on here, guys. Looking at myself. Thank you. So today we're going to talk about holistic stewardship for abundant living. And that is in a life to where we're going to learn how to do a little bit of choosing seeds and gardening and learning more about genetically modified foods so that you're more aware of what's going on with your life and how you have the choice now to figure out how to get your life, because you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later with your health. So these young boys, they're a couple little farm boys, and they want to know how long each of them have been farming. Probably not too long, these young whippersnappers, but we have to look at that in Genesis 2:8 that God had planted a garden eastward. He has been planting since the beginning of time. Man has been. But man has drastically changed things. They started taking and recreating food to try and help feed the masses. So when you look at this picture here, look at the picture of the farming and how the blow-by from these combines and how the wind will just carry whatever from place to place. And that's what happened to Percy in his fields when he got genetically modified crops by a blow-by. So we know that just through Mother Nature, things can change. So what is a genetically modified organism, GMO? Genetically modified foods, or GMO foods, are foods that are derived from genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms have had specific changes introduced into their DNA. Dr. Diane talked about the DNA, and each one of us have our own DNA. Well, plants have their DNA, animals have their DNA, and man has started interbreeding this DNA. So these techniques are much more precise, called mutagenesis, mutation breedings, where an organism is exposed to radiation, or chemicals to create a non-specific sustainable change. Techniques which the human-modified food organisms include selective breedings, plant breeding, animal breeding. Genetically modified foods, it's not a new deal here. I know it's just on the topics in the 2000s, but genetically modified foods have happened for a long time. For centuries, food crops and animals have been altered through selective breedings, while genes can be transferred during selective breedings. The scope for exchange genetic materials is much more wider in using genetic engineering. In theory, the genetic engineering allows genetic material to be transferred between any organism, including between plants and animals. When you saw in the movie, you saw the fish. If you were to really watch this movie, they show how fish interbreeding, and then they set it out into the wild to see what it'll do and what happens, and it just starts to spread like wildfire out in the oceans, in the kingdom, the world, in the kingdom of the animals. For example, a gene from a fish that lives in very cold seas has been inserted into a strawberry, allowing the fruit to be frost tolerant. So, you know, you've heard that different things are injected in tomatoes. These things have happened in 1992. By the far most, the common genetically modified organisms are plant crops. But the technology has been applied to almost all forms of life, from pets undergoing ultraviolet light to bacteria, which forms the HIV-blocking living condoms, and from pigs bearing spinach genes to goats that produce spider silk. Who's seen that movie, Genetic Roulette? Has anybody seen that movie? That's another movie that just came out. Actually, it's a friend of Dr. Diane's that had put that compilation together, and it's an amazing movie, and it backs all this stuff up too, where they're trying to make the goats produce this silk from the spiders so they can do bulletproof vests. I mean, man is just thinking up all these crazy things to get money, to get people tricked. People are getting okey-doked by this. So where did the genetically modified foods originate? Look, between 1997 and 99, the gene-modified ingredients suddenly appeared in 2/3 of the U.S. processed foods. So all the foods that we're eating, you can go to the store and just pull something off the shelf and look at it, and you'll see if it's got soy or corn and it's mass-produced, you can bet your bottom dollar it's more than likely genetically modified. All of our little Worthington meats, genetically modified. You probably didn't know that, but when you look at the list of the foods that are on the label, it's like right in there. It's alphabeticalized and it says Worthington's, genetically modified soy. So, you know, we've gone from one to the other, not realizing that we're polluting ourselves because we've given up the meat and we've grabbed onto the soy, and the soy is genetically modified. So as you start choosing your diet, you need to choose a little wiser, because most people don't know that. We think we're getting the great deals because we're not eating meat and how great that's going to be for our bodies, but we're getting rid of the beast and we're taking on the image of the beast. So the foods are alterations was fueled by a single Supreme Court ruling. It allowed the first time the participating or patenting of the life forms of commercialization. Since then, thousands of applications for experimental GMO organisms have been filed with the U.S. Patent Office alone, and many more abroad. The first commercially grown genetically modified whole food crop was the tomato. You've heard where they take I think it's a fish thing that they push into the tomato to make it yield a better, beautiful, whatever crop. I'm not sure exactly, but it's called Flavor Saver, which was made more resistant to rotting in California companies called Gene. The tomatoes were released into the market of 1994 without any specialized labeling. So already it slipped into no labeling in the beginning. And people were okay with it because nobody raised up and said anything, because nobody was aware of it. Nobody had any idea that this was going on, except for, of course, the scientists and those that were behind it, pushing it for money. So in February 1996, J. Sainsbury, at Safeway stores in the United Kingdom, introduced Europe's first genetically modified food product. A variant of the Flavor Saver was used by Zeneca to produce tomato paste. So now that we've genetically modified it, let's put it in a container and just push it out there. No one will know and see how long it lasts. Well, in Europe, during the summer of 1996, this happened following the GMO crops included insect-resistant cotton, herbicide-tolerant soybeans, both of which were commercially available in 1996. So this has been going on for a long, long time. And it's changing. That's why we have so many diseases. Our bodies are not handling all of this interbreeding and all of the changes and what it's going on in our bodies. They really don't know because it's not really been tested. Just now, lately, people are rising up and saying, no, we want organic, not genetically modified. But these guys, these crooks have been doing this for a long time, and they're getting away with it. So let's look in 2003, the countries that grew 99% of the global transgenic crops were the United States, there we are, 63%, Argentina 21, Canada 6, Brazil 4, China 4, and South Africa 1. As you can see, it's just starting to spread and spread and spread. And that's only in 2003. Canada now has a big deal about not allowing that into their country. Probably because of Percy and how he he stood up against that, I would be my guess. But today, the grocery manufacturers of America estimate 75% of all processed foods in the U.S. contain genetically modified ingredients. So that's when you go and you pick up those chips or you pick up whatever, and it's all in there, and you just don't realize it because it's not saying, hey, we're genetically modified. So let's take a picture, good look at this picture. In this picture, there's one item that they just can't genetically modify. Does anybody know what that is? It is peanuts. Peanuts have a specific bacteria. We just had that big scare with the salmonella, and they crawled it all off the shelves. They probably were trying to tamper with that. Peanuts are not approved for sale by the FDA to be genetically modified as of October 2010. And peanuts have been studied in an attempt to be approved for sale, but as genetically modified products, can't happen. But they've been trying since 1993. The warning here, the FDA has made statements in general about genetically modified products, that the process of genetically engineering and traditional breeding are different and they lead to different risks. People say, oh, well, what's wrong with it? You know, they're giving to the planet. We're helping people overseas. This is helping to produce mass food. But as we can see here, because of the GMO products, our modification to the genes of the product, it is possible that more allergic reactions will be created and these new strands of genes in GMO products. So if you live in Europe now, avoiding GMO foods is easier because it has to be labeled. We don't label it here. It's not like, oh, don't buy this because it's genetically modified. It's like, oh, here, buy this because it's organic, right? We're going tit for tat. But let me tell you something about organic food, ladies and gentlemen. I worked in the citrus business for 7 years. We had one small organic field, and that guy that owned that business, ran everything organic. So just because it says organic, there's no guarantee there, because I witnessed that myself, and we ran stuff all over the place from Canada to California, organic, and it was only one small field that was tested. So we never really know what we're really getting. And I watched a documentary on the internet of Whole Foods. Whole Foods have been implanting genetically modified foods for a long, long time, but they're not telling anybody, and they're raising the prices, and people are flocking to Whole Foods, and they got caught. So we just really don't know where our food is really coming from. So we need to think about how we're getting our food and what we're getting, because things are changing. The transgenes design facilitates transfers into the gut bacteria. Here's where we eat the food. We don't know what it's going to do to us. And that bacterial sequence is higher herbicidal residues, for example, significantly increases the transfer rate. So we're getting all these pesticides, herbicides, and then we take it in, and that helps produce whatever it's going to do in our bellies. And then that transgene readily traveled from the genetically modified food into our DNA of our gut bacteria. And so we all have good bacteria and we have bad bacteria in our stomachs. So those that are like suffering from bowel problems and all these horrible things and have leaky gut syndrome and all this stuff, that stuff is leaking rapidly into your system. And so we're getting cysts, we're getting all these weird diseases, cancer's on the rise, people's insulin's off the hook. And by the way, most of the insulin is genetically modified products are in that. So they're taking the pill, they're injecting it into their bodies, and we're all getting, it's just a pass around. It is a pass around. So it's important how we choose our food, and it's important how we protect ourselves from the things that, you know, sometimes we don't know what we're getting. So we have to armor up. And there's different things that we can do that. That's a whole nother deal with vitamins, which you talked about. And those things are very, very important so that we can boost our systems up to help put our own armor inside our own bodies to protect ourselves from these things that are going on. So the transgene proliferates into the gut bacteria over a long term. Once it's transferred into the gut bacteria, the transgenes confer survival advantages. So now it's playing, you know, it's going and going and going, and it's doing tit for tat and making an allowance into our systems. And then it's enduring and it's spreading. So we, you know, all these things are happening inside our little bodies. I mean, these are the things God created, and they were perfect, but man has changed so much. Who knows how long we're going to be on this planet from everything that's going on. We're killing ourselves with our fork and spoon. I mean, the blow-by from all of these pesticides and things that are just filtering through the air, it's just incredible. Due to antibiotics and herbicide-resistant promoter functions in the bacteria, the genetic mechanism that promoted uncontrollable replication. That's scary enough. That is scary enough. So having infected our gut bacteria, the foreign genes and the proteins they create become harmful to many. We have more allergies. People have, I've got hay fever. It's getting stronger every year. Well, maybe that's because we're getting these genetically modified symptoms of things going on. Or you're living next to somebody that's planting something, and the blow-by from whatever they're throwing out there, whether it's they're growing, like in Phoenix, we've got alfalfa, we've got cotton, soybeans, hay, whatever, and that the farmers are blowing all that stuff right in the cities. And so it's just, and this is a city that doesn't have a lot of air movement. So it's no wonder that we're getting multiples of different things that are just off the hook here. You used to come to Phoenix because you had problems with allergies, and it helped you because of the sun, right? Wasn't that back in the 70s? Go to Phoenix, we're having allergies. Go to Phoenix, go to Phoenix. Good stuff. Now it's like, what are you doing in the cesspool? It's just stagnant air, and it doesn't blow out of here very often, and it's just mass contamination. So where do we go from here? What are we going to do about it? We know that Ellen G. White says, get out of the cities, go back in, get out of the cities, plant your gardens, do this, do that. And because of, I want to say, because of the way we are programmed or how we live our lives or how we've been brought up, we live inside the cesspool. And it's hard to get out of the cesspool because we're in routine mode. Make sense? This is our routine. We're brought up in the city. We're doing the city thing. I mean, I was brought up more in the country, right, Dad? That's my dad back there. Hi, Dad. He brought me up in the country. We had gardens. We did these things. He was a farmer. So we lived outside of the city. But as I grew up, I couldn't wait to get to the city because good things were happening in the city. There's shopping. Everything's at your fingertips. You can make money. But you know what? It's a trick. So we have to figure out how to live inside this until we can figure out how to get outside of it. So we're going to learn a little bit more about gardening. So if you go like to the farmers markets, that's one way of getting food that you can almost trust that it's not genetically modified. You can go and talk to the people that work the farmers markets and have a conversation, get to know them, and do what you need to do to find out what's going on in their deal. And they'll usually tell you how they grew their food. They're proud. Look at my tomatoes. Aren't these great? Yes, I did this and that, blah, blah, blah. Let me share with you. Because that's their life. So, of course, if you go and you get to know these people and you put your orders in and they want to serve you because they're proud of what they're doing, it's different from the norm. It's better than Whole Foods. So we need to learn how to get to know that, find out about heirloom seeds. What are those seeds? Does anybody know what an heirloom seed really is? We heard that terminology. It's a seed from the past that is existing through all the centuries, and it's still existing. It's a seed that's not tampered with through genetically modification. Monsanto is eating up all of those seed companies as fast as he can to control the world and their food. So if you can get your hands on, while they're still available, get your seeds. And Mr. Beyreis is my farmer. We have these magazines, Seeds of Change. There's Your Garden, Your Community, Your World. These are seed companies. Burpee is a seed company. You can get information out of Mother Earth News. All of these things are up here for you to come and look at. It's important that you get to know an heirloom seed company, because one day your seeds will be like gold. You don't need gold and silver. If you have those seeds, you can barter back and forth because people are going to be starving. You can't eat that gold coin. It's going to do you no good. Money, what does the Bible say about gold and silver? Pardon? I can't hear you. They're going to. Well, gold and silver is going to do us no good on this earth at all in the future. Money's going to be worthless to us. So I encourage you to start looking up heirloom seeds on the internet. It is awesome to start digging and searching and finding. My husband spends hours in those magazines. Shopping locally will also give you the opportunity, like I said, to speak to the farmers and find out what's going on with them. And then it starts with you. With you. How are you going to make a difference for yourself and for your family? We're going to look at different ways to do it. How many of you plan to go to the country within the next 3 to 5 years? One person, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of all of us. Okay, so you look at, okay, if we can't go to the country, then we must bring the country something to us. And this is where we're going to learn how to do gardening. So there's a time that's coming when God's people will not be able to buy and sell. That's what the Bible tells us. So how are you going to survive? We need to be thinking about the things now. These things are available today. Down the road, you're not going to find your hands on that stuff. Today's the day to start preparing for the things that you need for the future, because if the internet's out and you don't have a telephone and this and that and you can't get to nothing, wouldn't it be nice to have something in place, a plan ready, things getting going so that you can start now, practice, and then in the future be a little bit of an expert? It makes sense because we're not going to be able to buy and sell. So in Revelations it says that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. We do not want to be that person. So blessed is he that readeth and that he hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things that are written therein. For the time is at hand. Today's the day to start preparing. Today. So we look at country living states that the importance of being in the country where we can grow our own food. Ellen G. White specifically speaks about that, how important that is way back then, and it's more important today. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country where they can raise their own provisions, for in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Planning. You have work to do. We have work to do. Let's step into the garden. Isn't that pretty? Doesn't that look inviting? It's like, man, there's nothing better than nature, just going out and just engulfing yourself in nature. It's a whole nother world. It's peaceful. It's beautiful. How about your own backyard factory? We're going to start learning about how to choose our space. You want to find a space in your yard, maybe on your patio. If you can't even use the outdoors, how about your windowsill? Starting maybe your herbs or something on your windowsill. You can grow lettuce in your house on a windowsill if you had to, and cut it off and do whatever. Get some herbs going, stuff that will help you medicinally or food-wise. Our family refers to our small backyard vegetable garden. It's just a small square footage. We enjoy the wealth of vegetables year-round, and you can too. And I'll show you a picture, which is hilarious, but at the end of this, you'll see a picture of where there used to be a jacuzzi that during a microburst blew out. And so we said, okay, well, that's worthless. We don't use it anyway. So we filled it with dirt, and now we have our little garden in the backyard. So we made good use of what we had that was worthless anyway. So it's important to start planning where you're going to plant your garden. Where does the sun come up? Where does it land? Where can you put different things? Whereas you got your herbs and things that you're going to use all the time close to your window so you can see it and go out and cut it. I mean, if out of sight, out of mind sometimes. I know I'm guilty of that. So it's important to get yourself a chart of your yard and start looking at where you'd like to plant things. Start looking at where it's shaded from the trees. Are these trees shaded all year round? Well, mostly in Arizona, yeah. Do they have mesquites and the pods are going to fall and pulverize your stuff? Is that a problem? You know, there's different things that we have in Arizona opposed to what's going on, say, in the snow countries where the leaves all fall down and it just pulverizes everything and changes. So you have to do it according to your zone. And that is why I gave you this chart here, so that you could look at what the zones are for this area and how to plant the different things and when to plant them. This was created by a friend of mine, Greg Peterson, and he has done his homework. He's the urban farmer. If you ever get a chance to see him, he is amazing. He's on 13th Street. What is it, 13th Street in Glendale or something? He's got a whole urban thing going on right in the city. His name is actually on here. You might look it up, urbanfarm.com, and check him out because he's got it all going on in his world. He's got rain barrels and all sorts of composting, and he's got fruit trees, and he shows you how to do different things, and it's all just the ecosystem in his yard, and he has tours, and he's an amazing guy. So there are ways of doing it. Oh, we can't plant it in the desert. It's not going to live. I don't have a green thumb. You just got to keep practicing because you can. So you want to choose a sunny location where there's no better way to start than choosing a spot for your garden. Most vegetables need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So you kind of need to look at where your yard is and what's going on and how the sun is. Is it facing the south, the north, the east, the west, and where is it all going to be laid out? So you look at your leafy greens like spinach and lettuce can thrive on a bit less sunlight. And as you assess your yard in the winter, remember that the deciduous trees that are leafless will cast their shadows in the seasons as it progresses. So all these things are like a plot map of your yard or your space or even your windowsill. Is the sun come in this window, or is it at the end of the day and it's just not going to do you that great good? You need to figure out exactly what's going on. If possible, locate the garden so that the access to and from the kitchen is easy and convenient. I said that. It's really nice when you get to go out there and you pick all your stuff out and you create whatever you're creating, but if you forget it's out there because it's over somewhere you don't see it, you'll neglect it. So it's really fun to cook with stuff that you've grown. When the garden is easy to see and reach, you notice what you need to be tended and take full advantage of your harvest, and that is quite true. Sustainable gardening, simply put, is a garden with sensitivity toward the environment. It enables the garden to thrive naturally for years to come. Sustainable gardening practices include composting. We're going to go through this. Mulching, adopting smart watering practices, and using natural means of pest control. All these things can be done naturally, and we're going to go through this. So often sustainable gardens are organic gardens, gardens that grow food without the use of any of these problems, petrochemical pesticides, herbicides, and inorganic fertilizers. The soil. Let's take a look at our soil. You know, we say, oh, deep black soil is the best. When you go to the Midwest, it's black, good-looking soil, and it's full and whatever, like in Iowa. But here we have sandy soil, clay soil. So you got to look at the soil and figure out what's the best way to check your soil. So your soil foundation of your garden, because the plants take the root-gathered important minerals and other nutrients from it. Here are several ways to enrich your garden soil. The ideal garden location has loose and drains well. When I do like these container plants, I'll just show you. This is one of my giveaways, don't laugh. Okay. I always put rocks in the bottom of it. Always. Number one, it helps give little minerals, and number two, it actually helps give it drainage. So it's important that you have drainage, because if you don't, it's going to just not be a good thing. If your soil isn't perfect, you can improve it over time by adding inorganic materials such as compost. In composting, there are several ways to compost at home. The most familiar method is to build your compost pile in your backyard, consisting of garden and lawn trimmings. How many people do that? Just gathering all that stuff, great, and putting it in a pile. So then after you do that, you can add your fruit and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, and other garbage-bound items. With time, these items could decompose into rich organic matter. So the Environmental Protection Agency reports that the yard trimmings and food residues together consist 23% of the U.S. waste stream. That's a lot of waste. That's a lot of waste going to waste. And check this one out. Studies have shown that the home composting can divert 700 pounds of material per year per household. That's a lot of waste. That's a lot of good stuff you can put into your earth and grow great things. God is good. He has taken stuff and just reused it. You know, he keeps the planet clean. I mean, he's amazing. Composting in the United States has become a cottage industry. We know people that gather stuff from all over the place, and they're selling it like hotcakes because it's good money, because people are trying to enrich the soil. It's so depleted. Composting is defined as a process that takes organic waste and turns them into soil improving additives or a medium to grow plants. It is a sustainable material rich with humus that is dark brown or black and smells earthy and soil-like. Kind of like your tea this morning. I'm kidding. I thought that was earthy. It was nice. Water waste such as yard trimmings, food waste, manures, even newspapers is usually combined with bulking agents such as wood chips to provide proper medium. The finished product is soil-rich in nutrients. What can't we compost? Anyone? Okay. Anything else? Styrofoam? Okay. Right, exactly. Black walnut tree leaves, branches, they may release agents that are harmful to plants. Coal or charcoal ash, these may contain harmful substances. Dairy products, milk, eggs, these things attract pests and they just smell bad. Diseased plants, you don't want to throw a plant that's dying into your compost because it could transfer other disease problems to other plants. And there's your fat and your greases, the things you were talking about, lard, oils. These create problems and pest attraction. Meat scraps, fish bones, these things you do not want to put into your compost. How about your dog and cat waste? You don't want to put that into your compost. It can have parasites. Yard trimmings that have been treated with pesticides. Why have an organic thing and then put the pesticides back in it? It makes absolutely no sense. So how do we begin? How are we going to do this? Depending on the location of your living situation, you can compost either in or outdoors. And people are like, oh. But you're already throwing away the most important component. All the composting requires are 3 basic ingredients: Here we've got brown, which includes these things such as dead leaves and branches. Green, where your grass and your vegetable waste like you were talking about. Coffee grounds and fruit scraps. Water is the third ingredient. We need water. We need to mix that up. We need to keep it moving. Ideally, you would have equal measures of greens and browns. We had our leaves, and browns provide carbon to the process, while greens provide your nitrogen. And the water helps the process move along. In the backyard, chicken wire fence can be easily constructed to the house of a compost pile. You can also purchase the bins. Those are real popular now. You see those bins in people's yards, front yards, backyards. When you drive around, they're all over the place. We actually have one. And they work quite well. They're made especially for the composting. Placed in a dry area, shady area in your backyard near a water source so that you can not forget to add your water. Be sure large pieces to the compost are chopped or shredded because you're going to have to turn that stuff. Place 6-inch layer of the brown material on the bottom. Add your 3 inches of green to the top. Then some topsoil to finish off the compost and a third layer of brown materials 3 inches deep. Lightly mix in 2 top layers. Add water until moist. So you're just going to keep that thing turning and going. And it's going to take you a while to get that going where you need to be. Turn your compost pile every week to distribute the air and the moisture. Move dry materials to the center. Your new compost pile will be ready in 1 to 4 months. But allow your pile to sit for an additional 2 weeks to cure. Getting it all mixed and ready to go so that it works quite well for you. Here you can see where she's got the barrels here. Here she's got a garden going back here. She's got a compost pile, and she's just kind of stirring that up, adding whatever, mixing it around. But these are pretty nice little barrels here. It's just really, whatever you need to use as a barrel, which is nice. It doesn't have to be any specific, go out and buy something special. Composting indoors. Has anybody composted indoors? This is a little different here. Another kind of composting is Verma Composting. This is the composting with worms. You know, we want earthworms into our compost anyway, or into our gardens, because they aerate things. They keep things moving and they do wonders in there. Worm composting can be done both indoors or out, making it a suitable method of composting year-round. To make compost, red worms are kept in containers with a moist bedding material. Food scraps are put into the container with the worms, and in time, the worms' excrement create a rich fertilizer. Our friend Greg Peterson had done it in, was it wool, Jim? What was that? It was some kind of material where he had these long tubes and he had the worms in there and he sliced it and he put his stuff in there and they did their deal in this cloth material and then he would have that close to his garden. It was pretty fascinating. So you put the food scraps in and they go ahead and they grab all that. And the simple process is to use the worms to digest the waste products. Using a large rubber tote filled with the good topsoil, it inhabits a colony of red worms. And who wants to put that in their house? Okay. Worms eat the garbage, and this provides some of the best potting soil available in the form of worm castings, the byproduct of feeding. Mulch. Mulch is another thing we need in the garden. Mulching your garden will help retain moisture, reduce the amount of weeds, and will also produce the roots of the plant from the temperature variations. Degradable mulch can also be enriched with the soil. So when you see a garden, like for us in the summertime, mulch is really important because everything dries out. So if you can figure out a way to use mulch, or sometimes we've used carpet, right? Running carpets down our rows. We take old used up carpet and put it down the row. It keeps the weeds from actually coming through, and then it keeps the land, the earth moist. And it's a great way of using a type of mulch. But there are different ways of doing it. You can use wood chips, straws, leaves, petals, and recyclable plastic can be used for this. Water is the next really, really important thing. It's one of the most important things besides seeds and soil. We must have a good water supply, especially in Arizona. So the next important step is to use conservation water. The easiest way to conserve water is to group your plants. Those that need tons of water, group them together. Those that don't need so much, group those together. Because we have a place where we flood irrigate, so everything's getting the same kind of water. But if you're not doing that and you live in the city and you have just your yard and your garden hose or whatever, you don't want to be just soaking everything out in the ones that don't need so much water and wasting your water, killing your plants. You want to group these according to what's going on. The best way to tell when the water is by inspecting the soil in the root zone. Plants that have shallow roots are the first to suffer in the droughts that are hit because they can only take moisture from the small area of the soil. Plants that are deeply rooted can withstand drought for a long time because they draw from the reservoirs in the water. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's drip irrigation. We'll get to that. It's true. So when you see the root depth, turf plants have very shallow root systems. Root depth is never more than 3 inches. Leafy vegetables grow to the depth of 6 to 10 inches, which is a little better. When you see your bean roots, they're a foot in depth, and corn is like 2 feet. Potatoes do 18 inches, and tomatoes and asparagus do 3 feet. So everything has a different root depth, and so they need more or less water, depending on what you're growing or how you're putting them, whether they're in a barrel or in the ground. If it's got a good root depth, then it can grab from the reservoirs that are in the earth. But if it doesn't, then say you have it in a pot or whatever, you need to just plant these things according to how you're going to have your depths and what's going on in your yard. If the soil that surrounds the plant becomes devoid of moisture, the plant will die. No kidding. The best course of the action is to allow the soil to dry and then the water deeply. Do not water too frequently or the soil will remain soggy and wet, and then we're going to have a problem with root rot. So everything is a consistency. Everything works together one way or another. It is easy to determine the soil's moisture status by examining it. If the soil breaks easily and has a shiny edge and glistening, either near or above its water hold capacity. So when you're checking your soil, you want to look at it. Did I water that too much? Is whatever? Then you'll know that. And if it's if you can do your handprint by squeezing the soil, it has ample water. So like if you go out and you're like, oh, do I need to water this or not? You can take a look at the soil and see exactly what's going on, because you don't want to sog out your roots and kill your plants. Rain barrels. My father, this is his rain barrel. I got it from him, and he got it in Oregon. You can get barrels that look like this that are blue. You see them kind of like in the horse areas or whatever, and they have food-grade hydrogen peroxide in it. So you just cake them and uncap them and let them air out and then rinse them out, and they're good to use for a rain barrel. We know now that in the different states, like Colorado or whatever, it's illegal to gather rainwater. Did you know that? So it's not illegal to gather rainwater here in Arizona as of yet. And if you're gathering rainwater, it's best to have a metal roof and gather it off of that and put it into your barrel so you have good water. You don't want to have a bunch of other chemicals coming off of shingles or whatever, all those particles in your water. It's not illegal in the state of Arizona right now, but the reason that it's illegal is because they believe it belongs to the state and it needs to go into the state's earth. So the world is changing. It's changing. But right now we can collect rainwater in the state of Arizona, so if you have an opportunity to take a barrel or a container or whatever, when it rains, we have something, we rush out there through our rain spouts and we're gathering our rain and we water our garden. It's free water around our yard, and that's a good way to get free water. And it also has different nutrients in it. So it comes straight from the sky. It's free. God gave it to me. You know, let's have at it. So you greatly reduce your rainwater by running off by purchasing these kind of rain barrel systems and putting it under your roof downspouts. You know, you just take, everybody has those on their house, I hope, and then you just kind of break a part of it off and stick your barrel underneath it. And the barrel will capture all the rain that would normally run down into your lawn, down into the street, down into the grates, into the sewers. Once the water is captured, you can water your garden by just dipping into it, or you can put into irrigation drip systems, which is what you're talking about. And that drip system is controlled by application of water with a system of hoses with tiny holes consistently seep small amounts of water into your garden or your lawn. And that's a good way to, it is a good way to actually put water in the ground here in Arizona. There's pros and cons with that. I mean, there's different ways of looking at that. Yeah, it's constantly seeping or whatever, but some will get more water than others, and you have to figure out your plant map. It's important that you know what you're doing. Because the water is being applied close to the soil where it can be immediately absorbed, little water is lost to evaporation or runoff. And we know here it's just sucked right out. So, additionally, the soil never dries out and your plants receive the proper amount of water. Often these drip systems can be set up to use rainwater collections and in barrels. So it's just however you do your map. Let's talk about pest control. A sustainable garden is a garden free of harsh pesticides and herbicides, right? We want that organic. We want the best food we can get. You know, is it aphids? Is that what you call aphids? Aphids that come on the plants. There's certain things they don't like. One of the best ways to control the pests is to use a process called integrated pest management, which includes the strategies for pest management with no harsh chemicals or contaminants. Some of these methods include growing plants that will attract good insects that prey on the pests. You know, we want to bring in the good bugs that eat the bad bugs. We want to get rid of those aphids. Using plants that are naturally pest resistant. For example, rabbits don't like marigolds. So that's good knowledge. We have rabbit problems. Plant marigolds. They don't like that. Using non-toxic ingredients such as borax, vinegar, hot peppers, ammonia, control the bugs and weeds. I have a friend that makes an ingredient that has beer and mouthwash and water and vinegar, I think, and sprays that, and they hate that. The bugs hate that. By providing a good layout in your garden, you will find out garlic, onion, basils are just a few of the plants that provide natural pest control. We have a friend that lives way out west, and he planted, I think it was basil by his tomatoes, or basil by the strawberries, wasn't it? And it was a pest control, or it was garlic by the strawberries, and they don't like that, so they don't go and attack the strawberries. So there are different ways if you look up on the internet and find out what plants kind of coincide with what plants as pest control, because there are ways to plant your garden to where you don't have to use anything. Isn't God good? He creates all these wonderful things for us. By implementing environmentally friendly gardening practices such as organically enriched soil with compost and mulch, making the most of water resources, and by adopting those non-toxic methods of pest control, your garden can become a sustainable ecosystem that will thrive for generations to come. So let's take a look at different ways of doing gardening. Box gardens or container gardening is a great way of putting stuff together and start your planning in your yard. It's an easy way of doing it. So we have them in our yard, and my husband surprised me one day. I came home, and he had created these lovely box gardens. I'm like, oh, sweet. So what he did is he took untreated railroad ties and made box gardens. And then he took this plastic, which is a real heavy black plastic, and he placed it in and pulled out so that the varmints didn't really come through and the weeds didn't come through, and then he had planted me a garden. So that's one way of planting a garden, is through using these box gardens or raised beds. You got the untreated wood, you put your plastic and your dirt, your compost, your seed, your water, sunshine, and lots of prayer. Isn't that pretty? It's all in a container. You know, if you have, all I have in my backyard is rocks. Okay, so let's change the process here and put in these boxes and let's make it a garden. There's always ways of changing your yard. Now, isn't this neat? I would just love to walk in there and just hang out. I mean, that's beautiful. They've got raised beds. Over here is like a little greenhouse. These are all raised beds growing all different types of things with little walkways through it. That's nice. I mean, that's a nice backyard. Heirloom seedlings and transplants. We kind of talked about the seeds. Here's some seedlings, putting them in little containers. And we're actually going to do that today. We're going to give you a little container, and we're going to plant a little seed, and you're going to take it home, and you're going to nurture your very first, or your first little garden thing for me. How's that? One of the most important things is to find your garden space. Find a space that's going to be good for you, where you're going to be able to enjoy your place and go out. This is actually my backyard. Here we have little trays, and this little, that used to be a jacuzzi. We've planted our seedlings. My husband's really good at this. Start little container gardening and getting them in seedlings so that you can plant them in the ground. This was a jacuzzi. You can see it back back over here. Now it is a garden. Just taking space and redoing it, making it whatever you need to do. If it's dead space, change it. Here we talked about the windowsill gardening. Here's our windowsill. Container gardening is a great way if you just have a small apartment or whatever, taking different things and making little containers. I took this little wheelbarrow that was decrepit and ready to be thrown in the dumpster, and I said, okay, I'll just make a little garden thing out of it and decorate it. We're good. And it works. I mean, it's a container. So then we can talk about greenhouse gardening. Oh, I can't do a greenhouse. Well, we found a greenhouse that's this big. It's not that big. How big is this, Jim? 12 by 12, little greenhouse that we found at Harbor Freight that fit right in a space in the backyard. So, I mean, if you just start seeking and searching, when it's cold outside, which it should be cold now, but it's not, but when it starts to get cold, we'll probably have some kind of weird snap cold. These things are great to do our little seedlings and get things ready to go and start growing stuff. More container gardening. This is my front yard, actually. And it's like, oh, well, in the front yard, you're going to have people walking down. It's going to be flowers and beautiful, whatever. Well, we've got peppers here. We've got herbs here. I've got a rosemary bush here, herbs. We just intermix them. We have our plants with our foods. As you walk through, it's just very inviting. So we just kind of, instead of just doing, oh, we just want to have beautiful flowers, we mix it up. If you want to have, these were chives, they grow flowers. They have little purple bulbs, you know, pretty. So you just kind of mix it up around so it is, number one, it's still your little garden, and it's pretty, but it's producing food. And here's another container gardening, which is, these are just little plastic containers where they just kind of made a row of them. And these are little containers where they put little trestles on them. See this going like this? To catch the plants that are growing. And we're going to talk about trestle gardening. And that's what this is. Sorry, I'm moving. You know, this is a very simple thing. I got this at Lowe's. Put it in the ground. You can grow beans or whatever and let it grow up. Well, I don't have much space. So start growing stuff up a vine. Start growing stuff up. You might not have space out, but you have space up. So you can use this as a gardening tool. Or like we use this for tomatoes. Right? That's the famous tomato cage. But it also can be for peppers or whatever else you need to raise up, to grow up, so that you can utilize your space properly. These are things, if you just be creative and think, it'll come to you, because it's really important that you utilize your space and get the best out of whatever you've got going, because that's what you have. You're going to be accountable for what you know and what you do with yourself, and you need to practice today so that in the future, you're not fumbling around, well, I guess I should have done that before. Well, we need to do it today so that we understand what we're doing, even if it's just a little pot. That's why I'm giving you the little seedling to go home with, so that you can nurture that, and you know what? Wow, that grew. I can do this. Because you really can. Trial and error. It's awesome. Here we have our row gardening. This is one of our famous ways of doing it. We actually have two acres that we plant sometimes. And oh, we have pests. Now, how are we going to do that? We got this and that. I know if you live out in Apache Junction, there's rabbit problems. There's just all sorts of stuff going on over there. Well, I like this because they have taken it a level and then they took it another level. But this is a cage in a garden, and it's all planted in the ground, but they wrapped it in a cage. You know, I don't know where everyone lives or what kind of problems you have with pests, but the animals got to eat too. That's the best way I can say it. So if you're having problems, then you're going to have to figure out how to cage stuff. Whether you took this like this and you put over a round thing like this and then put a netting over it. You know, there are different ways to say, well, I'm going to put it in the ground, but the rabbits are coming and this and that's happening. Well, then you want to put some stakes up here and then just put that cloth over it just to protect it, or maybe chicken wire or whatever. But it's all trial and error. It's however you decide to figure out your plot. Working in the garden is also shared experience for the family. If you have kids, it's good to teach them how to do it, or grandkids, bring them in, let them plant a seed or do whatever. The little girl that was here that left, she filled all these cups. She was so excited. She got to take a little cup with a seed in it to take home. I mean, kids love gardening. They love it. Consider the benefits of growing your own vegetable garden. lowers the cost of providing food for your family in a healthy way. You know that it's good, wholesome food. You grew it. You know what it has and what it doesn't have and where it came from, where you got your seed. It reduces the environment impact of transporting and putting your food in a warehouse. Sometimes we don't even know how long that food's been sitting in a warehouse before it came to the store. When I was in the citrus business, in order to bump up the crop, we gassed it with ether. Your citrus is gassed with ether in order for it to be from green to orange or yellow. You probably have no idea. It's ether gassed. Makes your meals more personal and interesting. Look, I created this. Look, come on over. Come on, I made this. I grew this. Oh, great. Provides wholesome activities and lasting memories for your children. Does that look great? How about from the field to the table? Those are all tomatoes. Right? Isn't that beautiful? All different rainbows of the color of tomatoes that this person grew. Now, if I had all that stuff, I'd be showing it off too. Right? Having people come over for a nice meal. I grew this. This is more personal for me. Look what we did. How about the little kids that are saying, oh my goodness, we grew this. Mommy, can I cook this today? Help me, show me what to do with it. It's all a learning experience from all generations. And everybody has a talent. We all have a green thumb. It might take a few trials and errors, but it's a knowledge that we need to keep in our minds and keep on the forefront. When you can't buy or sell, you're going to be in a jam. You'd rather be part of the solution than part of the problem. And having a garden in the city will be helpful for a while, but JoJo over here might not have any food and they're going to come and take what you have. That's why Ellen White wants us to be out of the city, because it's every man for himself. And I'll tell you one thing, if you have seeds that are non-genetically modified and you're starving, you can eat your seeds and will give you nutrition. So there's multiple ways of saving your life, and this is just another way of doing it. So does anybody have any questions right now? Yes. Oh, he had a question. Putting his arm up. When you go to Home Depot, these are what we use for our little markers for our garden. They're free. Oh, yeah, take as many as you want. Free, I like free. Free's good. So what I would like is, would you like to hand these out, Jim? We're going to plant these, or maybe everybody can just come up and take one. That'd probably be easier. I hope I have enough. If I don't, I'll create more. I want you to come and plant a seed. This is the end. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do the drawings first. Okay, good idea. And I'm not even, I'm not being prejudiced. I'm just going to, one thing that is good to have when you're planting, this is my garden apron. That was a gift to me. I can put all of my stuff in it, right? It's got all these pockets. And so the first thing we're going to give away is a garden apron. And actually, B. Davis, do you know her? She made this apron for me. 574123. All right. Did you get a ticket? Okay. Okay, I'll throw that in the ground. 574125. Boy, these aren't mixed up very well. All right. Getting closer? 574127. Jeez, you? 127. 547127. I was saying it backwards? Yeah. The last one I have 547125. That would be you. Okay. All right. Well, you get the apron? See, it could be guy or girl, this one. All right. So I'm dyslexic. All right. All right. This is a sprouting bag, which this is my favorite way to sprout. Does anybody know how to use these sprouting bags? You hang it up, you put your seeds in it, you dunk it in water, and you hang it up. And twice a day you dunk it in water and hang it up. And it sprouts. It's better than using jars and trays or whatever for me. I like that. I have a hook above my sink, and that's how I sprout. 547121. All right, Art. All right. Okay. I'm going to give this famous book away. This is from Jerry Franklin. He's a man that does family camp and teaches survivals and stuff in Canada. He's a great guy. He's been at this church before. And it's 547-112. All right. All right. Okay, I hope you get the Topsy because you were talking about it. Just kidding. Okay, we'll pick that one. Must be the winner. 547-141. Well, that would be you. I hope you have good luck, and if you do, tell them. And 547-116. Dad? All right. My dad got it. We're going to count on you planting these flowers, Papa. We're going to have a lesson later. Just kidding. All right. And for my one more. 547-136. All right. God touches the earth with beauty and the hearts of friends with love. And one more. Okay. Oops. Oh, I should take the tag off. 547-134. All right. Yay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, let's come up. Oh, wait. I got one more. Sorry. The plant. 547-114. You? Oh, okay. Well, you'll... Please.
We got enough stuff at home.
I would give this one away, but my husband said no. This is kale, actually, that he started, and it's going to end up in the ground soon. Give it away? Oh, he's being generous. All right. 547-113. Are you kidding? How'd you get two? Okay. Look at... All right. Okay, so if you want to come up, I hope I have enough of these. If I don't, I'll make more. Everyone just come up and make a line. We're going to plant a plant. I probably don't have enough. I hope so. What this is, okay, wait, don't walk away. I should have explained this quick, huh? I guess I'll explain. This is a greenhouse that actually you can buy at Lowe's. This is where I got it. Inside the greenhouse is a hard pea pot. It's a potting soil pot. Looks extremely hard. So when you add water to it, it expands. So it becomes your little potting soil. And then you're going to poke your hole in it, and you're going to plant a plant, and then you take it home and you take care of it. Nurture it, love it, give it kisses. Talk to it. Okay. So we're going to plant fennel, all right? So here, go ahead and take one. And then you're going to poke your finger in it, and then we're going to put fennel in it. Come and help me, Jim. You can be the seed giver. Just a little bit, just to break the top. No, it's good. Then you're going to squeeze it together and cover it up. Okay. It's growing. It gets big. Yes. Oh man, fennel is so delicious. It's like anise. It tastes like